Childhood Snapshot, or a Poetic Play by Jean Harris. Harris stood in the middle of her yard. In one hand she held a long stick like a sword, thrusting it up to the threatened sky, only to bring it down with a hard crack against the grass, deftly decapitating the tops of wild onions that had been allowed to grow in the yard. In her free hand she held a cup, a glass cylinder of unsweetened iced tea, offset by a long, crazy straw. It was her bitter breakfast beverage, of course. Behind her was Brick, resting on a footstool. Harris did a sidestep and marched towards the stool. She picked up Brick and placed it on her lap, like a department store Santa with a toddler. "I can," said Harris, speaking to nobody, "if I may, invite you all on a strange journey into the past. This is how I met God." Harris fancied herself to be something of a craftsman, a mason after a fashion. She fancied herself placing gems into her structures to be unearthed later. But that comes with a price. Her church is not built on an easy foundation. If God is a brick, it's natural there is a mason. "That was Charles Foster Kane's opening line," said Harris in the present moment. This was after Brick revealed himself to me at the construction site. She stepped off the chair and extended her arms wide like she was giving the whole world a hug. Inside the house, Molly Harris watched the scene play out, and she began to regret releasing her daughter from her grounding. "Sicko was skeptical, as all non-believers are," said Harris. "These are the mutterings of the septic tank. These are the mutterings of putrid piss and shit. If God were a brick, do you pray? What does it do? How do you like it? What does it mean to you, Harris, mod or not? Have you ever been afraid? Have you ever prayed, Harris? You should be fucking spayed. Are you odd, Harris?" "Can you believe he said that shit to me?" said Harris in the present moment. "I'm neither odd nor afraid. It's a ridiculous way to go through life. I held Brick above my head and proclaimed to the sky, 'I am the Pope of Brick.' The divine word comes through me, the most inspiring word, ecclesiastical. Even now, before everything, it's ethereal." "Next was everyone's favorite boy, Wise Peter," said Harrison, the then and now. "He's as wizened as his name suggests, but his fears and anxieties scrape the sky and pierce beyond into the empty black of space. You are ignorant. That brick was found at the construction site. You're arrogant. You're a total idiot. You're lacking bite." "Just as everything began, it ended with Charles Foster Kane," said Harris. He put on his best impression of his TV heroes simultaneously. At once he was Jim Rockford. He was Robert T. Ironside. He was Columbo. He was Encyclopedia Brown. He fashioned himself into the thing we needed him to be. He was their priest king, and he was a pompous little motherfucker about it too. I agree with everyone here, Harris, but there's a place for you here in this broken group. Wise Peter, real and tangible, watched this whole show through a hole in Harris's backyard fence. He watched her weird little performance that she had put on for her audience of just herself. Herself and perhaps Brick. He cut across the yard and let himself inside. "For the record, I don't talk like that," said Wise Peter as he approached Harris. "Artistic license, Petey," said Harris. "I see your folks let you out too." "That they did," said Wise Peter. "Which do you want to talk about first, your weird little play acting or the events that led to us being discharged from our rooms?" "I will not debate the validity of my beliefs with you, Peter," said Harris. "Brick says you are a heretic who ought to be dashed against the rocks." "Funny, I didn't hear it say a thing," said Wise Peter. "Have you been watching the news? Maybe catch something on the radio?" "I don't take in the news. It's got bad energy," said Harris. "Right," said Wise Peter. "Well, To catch up to speed, it seems like our nightmare might be over and Charles Foster Kane will have to resort to a summer of boredom. They caught the killer? Asked Harris. They caught two people of interest, corrected Wise Peter. You're right. Charles Foster Kane's going to be pissed off. Frankly, I don't care, said Wise Peter. I'd rather he be in a bad mood than have us be in danger for the rest of the summer. He wanted to ask her if she felt the same. He wanted to know the contents of Harris's mind to see if they truly held the same biting terror and repulsion that he had been that over the screaming that they had heard in the woods. But she had already given him shit for being weak, so there was no use tossing this dog another bone. You're right, repeated Harris. Not that Wise Peter minded, he could hear people tell him that he was right all day. But what if they're wrong? Suggested Harris. Let's not consider that, said Wise Peter. Come on, said Harris. Don't be a bitch. Humor me. Suppose they're wrong, and there's still a bunch of people dead. What then? We heard something in the woods last night, and up until now, whoever's been doing this has gone undetected. Undetected as far as we know, said Wise Peter. Cops don't just let reporters know everything. Perhaps there's something they know that we don't. Maybe they had someone pegged from the beginning. Do you really trust Officer Clydesdale with anything? Asked Harris. She's Barney Fife, but with tits. Regressive, but not wholly inaccurate, chimed in Wise Peter. But if someone's acting with this level of violence, somebody's bound to notice. Harris leaned in and listened to whatever it was that Brick had to say. She then redirected her attention back to Wise Peter. Brick says they're hiding in the woods still. Brick can picture a cabin if you like, though he describes it as a field office. They? Asked Wise Peter, making the piss-poor decision of humoring her. Like it's multiple people? That and more, said Harris, shaking her head. Internally, Wise Peter punched himself for even deigning to hear her out. Okay, then, Wise Peter pressed on. What else does Brick know? Can he spill about the killer's real name? Maybe even his address and social security number? Or her, suggested Harris. Wise Peter reacted maturely. As we've been told all our lives, teenage boys are paragons of maturity, and Wise Peter acted the most maturely out of all of them when he decided to put on a baby voice and talk to Brick. "Was it me, Brick?" asked Wise Peter. "Don't be an ass," shouted Harris. She narrowed her eyes and listened again to the piece of red masonry. "Brick says you can go fuck yourself, nard." A whistling thing whizzed through the air, cutting between Wise Peter and Harris before it slammed and shattered Harris's glass of tea, spilling brown liquid and glass shards and ice cubes all over her table. Harris looked at the mess and started huffing and puffing as she struggled not to scream. What, why?" she asked in rapid sequence. They cast their eyes in the direction that the object flew, and found Sikorsky on the edge of Harris's yard, a lime green wrist rocket in his dominant hand, and a bunch of steel balls in his right. Harris marched over to him before he could defend himself, and she seized him by the arm, bent and twisted it behind his back as she effectively dog-walked him over to the table. "You're breaking my fucking arm!" shouted Sikorsky. Harris was far from done. She slammed his face down into the middle of the puddle that had formed on the table. The boy whined and snorted, sending bitter tea up his nostrils. Are you 9? Are you 9 years old, sicko?" shouted Harris. "Let me go," whined Sikorsky. "You deserve this," said Wise Peter. "Her mom's gonna freak out over this glass, sicko." Harris used her free hand and began to twist one of Sikorsky's ears, making the boy scream louder. "Fuck! If you rip my ear off, you'll never find out who the killer is, you bitch." "I think he's lying. Tug on it harder," said Wise Peter. Harris began to twist the smaller boy's ear until it became cone-shaped. After a moment of prolonged screaming, Sikorsky gave up the ghost. "Fine. It was Andy. It was Andy and Judd." Harris released Sikorsky's ear but held firm on his arm. With that, he was able to relax a bit, but not fully. Then Harris smacked the back of his head, dribbling it off the surface of the table. Rick says elaborate, dipshit. Charles Foster Kane entered the yard, wearing a new suit. It was cream-colored and missing a necktie. His delicate skin was shielded from the sunlight by the wide brim of a Panama hat and a large white umbrella. He was nursing something in a coffee mug that smelled so strongly of honey that it threatened to envelop the coffee aroma. With his free hand, Charles Foster Kane fanned himself. "It's probably true, but where's your proof, sicko?" "Get her to let me go and I'll talk," said Sikorsky. "Go to hell, I don't work for him," said Harris. "Come on," said Charles Foster Kane. "Aren't you a touch curious, Harris?" Harris was admittedly curious. She gradually released, but grabbed the back of his collar, forcing the smaller boy to stand up. Sikorsky's green eyes whirled around in all directions as he tried to compose himself, despite his skin being slick with tea. "You know, when I marry you someday, we're going to laugh about this," said Sikorsky. "Ew," muttered Harris. "Anyway, tell us what you know, or I'm going to actually break your arm." "Give me a second. I think I'm a little concussed," said Sikorsky. "You're well enough to talk, so talk," said Charles Foster Kane. "It's a mad situation," said Sikorsky as he leaned on the table for stability. "I was riding my bike around where we exited the woods last night, and what should I find? A bunch of police cars and those agents. They were dragging Judd and a naked Andy out of the woods." "Well, that certainly puts a damper on things," said Charles Foster Kane, miming smoking a cigarette as he spoke. "It almost fits. He'd be the perfect candidate, but there's something that just doesn't fit, you know?" He waved his arms in the air as if the motion of his limbs would conjure the right idea. Then he began to snap his fingers. "It's just like that, you know?" "I don't know at all," said Wise Peter. "You just don't want it to be him because it means the cops got ahead of us." "Yes," said Charles Foster Kane. "And I think it's innocent. And I think he's innocent. Funny how those things are copacetic. Besides, wouldn't it feel great if it wouldn't feel great if an innocent man got jailed by the men in black." "Andy is hardly innocent, and regardless," said Wise Peter, "I don't want to pursue this any further. We heard a woman getting murdered in the woods, Charles Foster Kane." "Let's put it to a vote," said Charles Foster Kane. "All opposed to continuing towards a bright future, raise your hand." To his horror, Wise Peter was the only one who raised his hand. "Well, there you go," said Charles Foster Kane. Sikorsky smiled wickedly in the direction of Wise Peter, who returned the look with a sneer. "Contrarian dickhead," said Wise Peter. "I just think solving it is going to be more fun than sitting inside and hiding from the heat," said Sikorsky. "Plus it might help that guilt you're feeling. You don't get to cold read me like that," said Wise Peter. "It's true. You'd feel so relieved if we could just have this case wrapped up in a nice little bow that you're ignoring how easy all this feels." "You're ignoring the facts," said Sikorsky. "Pray tell, what am I missing?" asked Wise Peter. "You forgot that Wes messed up his leg playing football last year. He'd be a screaming mess if he tried to climb up to the roof of the Bright House," said Sikorsky. "And he was already in jail whenever the first murders happened, so it can't be him." Wise Peter made a tent out of his fingers and carefully considered the facts that Sikorsky had laid out for him. Of course he could have numbed himself with liquor or any other ephemera, but this didn't account for the time. He wouldn't be coordinated either way. They'd all had the misfortune of seeing Andy West drunk, and he was a slobbering mess. "Glad to see you've seen reason," said Harris. "You were bothering me. If it makes you feel better, Brick voted in favor of us not investigating." "To be honest, Harris," said Wise Peter, "it doesn't make me feel better at all."